So hi everyone, my name is Paul Volson, and thank you for joining and viewing the Cybersecurity 101 course. Today we're going to review networking. We're going to have a primer on networking and networking security. It might take 2 or 3 sessions for us to go through this session. And we're also going to do a little bit different from last session. We're actually going to use a PowerPoint. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint now, and then we shall start. And I send that out to the students in the private chat. If you're seeing this later and you want the PowerPoint, just send me a message and I'll happily share it. So as I mentioned, today we're going to cover the fundamentals of networking. And the agenda that I've got actually laid out today, and probably for future sessions as well, is the following. So first we're going to cover what we'll need for the course, what we'll need for this session, which is really an open mind, a focus, and then also some tools that we'll be using, because I will be using both lecture and diagrams and tools to communicate and to teach a particular topic or concept. We're going to start with the OSI model, which is really the fundamental paradigm to understand networking, and that's a 7-layer abstract model. We're going to dive into the TCP/IP protocol, which is the fundamental protocol that's mostly used in networking and on the internet. The HTTP protocol, which is a higher level protocol. The DNS protocol, which is used for name translation on the internet, such as google.com, which translates to a particular address or numerical address similar to a phone number. Also the SSL protocol, which is used to encrypt or protect communication between one computer and another. And then we'll use networking tools to practice some of the networking concepts that we have reviewed in the prior session. And those tools are ipconfig, or on Mac it's called ifconfig, traceroute, which is used to trace a networking address from one computer to another, and nslookup. And then we're also going to use some more advanced networking tools, such as Chrome developer tools and Wireshark. And although we probably won't get to it today, we'll review some consideration and career opportunities. So this is just an agenda. We're going to dive into each of these items in more detail. And I just wanted to provide that as a list here. So let's start with the very, 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 very high level. I've named this the interweb-IP. You have in networking what's called clients, which could be your phone, your computer, and anything that has anything that's connected to the internet or networking. Could be your camera, could be your refrigerator. That is what we consider the client. Any client communicates via to a server, or what's called a server, and a server provides services to the client. So that may be logging onto Facebook, that may be uploading a video stream from your camera, that may be providing a web or financial transaction. And the way it does this is through the infamous cloud or the web, and the core protocol, but not the only protocol, is the TCP/IP protocol. And we will go more into this, of course, in additional slides. And so TCP/IP stands for Transport Control Protocol and Internet Protocol. And so this is just like a 20,000-foot level. And so in the upcoming slides, we're going to just kind of go down a couple thousand feet, so to speak, and get into more detail. So in this slide here, we're going in a little bit more detail, where we have an HTTP client, which is also just a client, but it's a more specific client, which is going to a web browser. And the reason it's called HTTP client in this more specific example is because there's other types of clients. Your camera or your refrigerator may not communicate via the HTTP protocol, because it's not going to wellsfargo.com or to facebook.com in order to get data on a website. But the HTTP still occurs over TCP/IP. And we'll go down levels and we'll understand how this plays in more. But I'm just, again, providing an overly simplified HTTP and TCP/IP diagram here. The thing to note here, which we will go into more detail, is the HTTP protocol is what's called a higher level protocol, and also stays at the application stack. And each protocol has a particular structure. I mentioned in prior sessions that a protocol is really just a language and a particular structured language of how one computer communicates to another computer, or more specifically, one application within the computer communicates to another application. So the only way that communication can be successful is if there is an understanding of that language by both parties. That's why we have English structure, for example, but that's not understandable by those of other languages like Romanian or German. To us, it sounds like gibberish. So it's very important that computers communicate at the right layer and at the right application, and there's multiple layers. So let's kind of go on some things that you'll need for this particular lesson. So this lesson is a little bit more advanced than prior lessons. So you'll need a Chrome browser with developer tools. You already have this. If you have Chrome, I'll show you how to get to it, but it's the feature that we will use. You'll need the ability to launch what's called a command line or terminal window. And some of the advanced, and you will do some use of networking commands that are built into Windows or Mac OS. And then ideally you want to download Wireshark. Each of these tools will solidify, in my view, the concepts that we review, because otherwise you will forget them even if there's a diagram and it makes sense now. But we'll be able to test and apply these concepts particularly with these tools. The ultimate tool is Wireshark. And it is an advanced networking tool, but I hope that if I can show you some very basics, you can get the courage to be able to download it and then test it out. So to get to the Chrome developer tools here, and you can do it while I can probably just show you. You go to the settings, more tools, and then developer tools. So why don't we do that now? Why doesn't everybody go to Example.com, which is the site that we're going to use, and I'm going to share the screen or the Chrome. Do you guys see my Chrome browser?
Yeah.
So navigate to Example.com. And part of the reason I want to go to Example.com is because most of the internet now is encrypted, and so it's harder to be able to demonstrate these the examples that I'm going to go into. So, like Facebook, almost everything is encrypted. It's hard to find something. But Example.com not, and it's made for networking training. So if you click over here on the settings, and then you go to more tools, and then you go to developer tools, you should get the networking section. So if you're online, let me know when you've done that, either by raising your hand or just confirming. Oh, Michelle, okay, I'm gonna let Michelle on. Amy, were you able to open up the Chrome browser and navigate to developer tools?
I'm at the homepage of Example.com.
Do you see the dot where you can open up a new tab? Let's see if there's another way to do it. There's probably a file way to do it. Chrome.
Is it like the IANA page?
Do you see my Chrome window, or does it not show it to you? Let me show you the entire screen. Hold on. No, I don't want to do that. Do you see? Okay, that might work better. Hang on. Okay, here to the right, do you see this here? The dot, dot, dot? Customize and
Yeah.
control Google Chrome?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you click that, do you see more tools?
Yeah.
Perfect, so select that and then go to developer tools. I closed mine, but let's try it again. Developer tools. And then do you see the network?
Mhm.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, it's hard to hear. Okay, perfect. So everybody at the networking developer tools, Michelle, I know you just joined a little bit later. Are you able to get to developer tools on Chrome?
Oh yeah, I know where that is.
Okay, so navigate to that. Um, Sorry about letting you a little bit late. Did you see the PowerPoint? Did you see the PowerPoint that I submitted in the chat window, or should I resend that? Let me share that.
Could you resend it? I don't see it.
No problem. So I'm going to resend it. I think you have a good enough background that we don't need to, I think, go to the first two slides. It's just a upper level slide. So here, I'm going to send it again. Networking security, there you go. So you'll have it. I'm going to the slides on the session as well, but just so you have it. All right, so I'm back in the PowerPoint. So now that we've got the Chrome developer tools, this is just an example of what we'll use, but just give you a heads up. The other tools that we will use is we'll need to launch a terminal window. And if you don't know how to do that, there's instructions here. One's for Windows and one's for Mac. If you're using a Mac, I don't have a Windows machine at the moment to be able to demonstrate, but if you're using a Mac, you can simply go to the Find here and then type in terminal. And if you're on a PC, all you need to really do is hit the Windows button. So Windows instructions. If you go to that link, it'll be more detailed, but I'll just tell you. It's so press the start menu, and then type in cmd.exe, and then that should launch it. Yeah, no. So type cmd.exe, but don't hit enter. And then it'll come up. So right click cmd.exe, and then select launch as administrator. So if I click on this one, it should say the same thing. Let me know if everybody's done that. Go ahead and either raise your hand or just call it out.
I don't it's not working for me. Is it the same on terminal as command line?
Are you on Mac or Windows?
I'm on Mac.
Okay, yes. So it's same as terminal. So if you launch it, or if you go to the Find and you type in terminal and you pop it up, that's the same thing.
And I'm on terminal, but what do I do after that?
Nothing. I just wanted to make sure that you're able to launch it and know how to launch it.
Okay.
So you're good. So at that point, you're in great shape. And so this, what we're going to use here, the reason we launch is we're going to use some networking tools as part of the course. So the last, so here, the next thing I want to talk about is some example networking commands. And we'll dive into more what they do in the following slides, but just to get you familiar with executing them. The commands are, some commands are similar to Mac Windows, others are just a little bit different. I'm sharing my screen, right? Do you guys see my screen? Okay. So on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, you type in ifconfig, you're going to get, depending on what you've got, a number of different networking devices attached to your operating system. But the one I want you to look at is just is actually in my case, it's not that one. It's not that one. So we don't need to dive into each ones, but just know that if you type in ifconfig, you will get a lot of the configuration of the networking devices on your computer. And some of them are real and some of them are virtual, which means they're just basically software versions. For Windows, you would type ipconfig, and this works differently on Mac than Windows. So once you've done that, go ahead and either raise your hand or make a comment. Okay, so Michael's good. Amy, again, for Windows, for Mac, he said it's just ifconfig, just as I have it on the screen.
I have it. I just I don't know how to raise my hand. Oh, here it is. Okay.
Okay, excellent. So ifconfig or ipconfig, what it does, again, one more time, is it provides configuration of networking, network attached devices. And the data you get, the type of configuration you get is what's called TCP/IP level configuration, which we'll go through a little bit more detail later. And it's useful in troubleshooting. So the reason I specify these commands is because it will help you troubleshoot if you have networking issues. Troubleshooting is the best way to really learn something, right? Fixing a car or fixing a computer, that's really the best way. So that's why I mentioned these tools. The other tools that you should be aware of is a tool called NSLookup. And you can just do NSLookup google.com, for example, or NSLookup facebook.com, any type of website name. And if I do garbage.com, it's going to say that there's no, that domain doesn't exist. What NSLookup provides is what what's called a DNS server knows about that particular name and what the actual networking address is. Because although we humans communicate with names, the actual computers don't care about names. They only communicate via the network address. So just the same way that you have a phone number, the telecom system doesn't really care that you don't say call Paul Volison. You have that name attached to a phone number in your phone, and then AT&T just calls that phone number, and then it knows how to get to that phone number based on how which carrier it is and what city it is and so forth, and what networking it's on. So NSLookup provides the exact same sort of translation. The reason it's a useful tool is because let's just say you can't go to facebook.com or google.com. One of the tools you would do is you would do an NSLookup, and you would see if your DNS server or domain name server has the translation, has an entry for that. And then if you can see here, if that was incorrect, so for example, if I did NSLookup, not google.com, Google something or other, right? It says that I have no record for that. So in addition to ipconfig, ifconfig, NSLookup is another tool. And next tool I want to discuss and briefly introduce is ping. So ping is used to make a call to a device on your network or the internet, and just test whether it can go from one computer to another. Because before it gets to google.com or any network attached computer, it must make number of hops per se through routers, and I'll talk more about that in the following slides. And if this essentially says if all of your networking is set up correctly, whether you can hit it or not. So if I do google.com, okay, what this shows here is that my computer was able to go to google.com. And the way I was able to do that is I was able to translate via the domain server the IP of google.com. So first, actually, what ping does is one of the things it first does is it contacts the DNS server and says, I need to go to google.com. I need to call Paul. What is that phone number? And then the DNS server says, okay, this is the actual IP. And then the computer actually says, all right, now that I know what the actual IP is, I will make a test connection. I will call it and basically hang up and see if the person on the other line picks up. And so this is what happens. Any questions on ping? Raise your hand if you've tested all three commands, so ipconfig or ifconfig, nslookup, and ping. Okay, I will assume Michael has, or he's aware of it. If not, see me after class. The last command I want to go to is traceroute. So between your computer and google.com, there isn't just a straight connection. It must go through various routers and various hops in order to get there. Just like when you make a phone call, it doesn't just provide you a direct connection. You're going through multiple satellites and multiple cities and multiple carriers as well, because you can call somebody on a different carrier, you can call somebody on a different country, and all of the networking devices need to be talking to each other, and it goes to various connections. So traceroute allows you to see in more detail the various routers and hops that we call that it goes through. So if I do, some of these example.com here, since that's the site we're going to use mostly, and it shows me all of the routers that it got to. So for example, this is my local computer. This probably went through my local ISP provider, who then called another router, who then called another Google Fiber router, which was then connected to edgecast.nest, and then eventually it made it to example.com. So all of these tools, everything works here, and so it's not very fancy, but when you can't connect to a website, or you can't connect to a specific website that you should connect to, you can use this to troubleshoot. So for example, if I ping example.com and I get, let's use a better example. So if I do this, ping will, because somebody has that website, but let's put a domain that doesn't actually exist. So if this was example.com, you're going to see this, cannot resolve host, okay? Because it contacted the DNS server and says, I don't know who this is. And that means either that the DNS server is not working or wrong, or is usually just not working or not configured properly.
Hey, Paul, I have a question.
Sure.
So how do you get the terminal to stop pinging a website?
Good question. Control-C.
Control-C. Thank you.
Okay, it's a good question. Yeah. So when you on Windows, it stops pinging, but on Mac, it will ping until you do a Control-C. So that's the example that I used to show that the DNS server is important. And let's say then it would suggest to me that maybe the DNS server isn't working. So I do an nslookup, and I provide this particular name, and sure enough, it should say no record. Server can't find blah, blah, blah. So this says the DNS server checked its entries and it can't find it. So although we use up a fake domain here, If you ever can't reach google.com and you do a ping google.com and you get unknown host and you do an ns lookup google.com and it says can't find google.com, then you have pretty good indication that something is up your DNS server. It could be your DNS server on your corporate network, could be your DNS server on your ISP. But let's say it's able to convert it. And what you might find, for example, is that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So then you could do a trace route. And perhaps it makes it this far to number 4. Actually, I think we can do a bad example here. So, no, we can't because we can't resolve the DNS. But perhaps you find that it makes all this to number 4, but it doesn't make it to number 5. Or it sometimes makes it to number 5 and other times it doesn't. So perhaps I might suggest that this router is dropping packets or not working. So these are just examples of the networking tools that you can use to troubleshoot and then also better understand your networking components. Any questions so far on what I just went over? Nope. Okay, excellent. Sounds like everybody's following along. By the way,
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
What do you call it when a router drops the connection? Is it called like it drops the connection?
Great question. It's called dropped packets. That's the term for it.
Okay, thank you.
That's an excellent question. So now that I showed you some of the commands that you can use, and I know I haven't gone into the details of all these protocols, but I wanted to show them to you and introduce them to you first, because when we use them or use them, you'll be able to put it together. So the next tool that I want to introduce, and this is an advanced tool, but it's really, really, really helpful if you want to understand networking. If you ever want to pursue networking or network engineer, and you tell the recruiter that, yeah, I know how to use Wireshark, you are 95% in, because it is the best way to understand networking. You want to get a handle of the commands that we went through first. You want to understand how the big picture works, but this tells you how the little details work. So you can download it now, but we probably won't get to using it in this particular session. But when you download it, what you can do is you can filter on a particular protocol. So here's an example. So I filter on SSL, and this tells me the specific steps that the SSL protocol takes before establishing a communication. You see that there's what's called a client hello, a server hello, an exchange of certificates, a download of certificates, and an exchange of certificates, a negotiation of the encryption, and so forth. So the point here being is that you can study the SSL protocol, and there's like 27 steps, and you can try to remember it, or you can look at the actual trace, and it just, along with the diagram, you can understand it and learn a lot quicker. So you go into a networking example and someone says, can you explain how SSL works? You can say, not only can I explain it, I've traced it on Wireshark, and you can just rattle this off. So it's a really good way to solidify your knowledge of networking. And I highly, highly recommend, after you get understanding of the basics, if you want to get more into networking, to download it and use it. And so here's the link to that. The one thing I will say is that you don't want to install it on a work PCs, because some corporate software will block it or will flag it, because what it allows you to do is to look at the actual data on the network, on your network. So it's a very powerful tool. So now let's go through a diagram in a little bit more detail about how accessing a website works. So I've already introduced the concepts. Here's your local network, and we can say an HTTP client, but consider that your browser. And it tries to make a connection to website.com or google.com or example.com. So in order to get to that, the data needs to go through a router, which will go through the ISP, which first goes to the DNS server and says, I need the IP of website.com. It gets that IP, goes back to the client, and then it actually goes to the router again and says, okay, I need to go to this particular server, which happens to be an HTTP server. And so then the communication happens through IP. And so we saw that in this example here. We saw that when we do a ping, it actually contacts the DNS server first, and then it returns back the IP. We saw that when we do an NS lookup, that contacts just the DNS server and tells us what the IP is. And if you look in this example, you can see that this matches here. So the NS lookup address is the same. And then we saw when we do a trace route, it actually tells us specific routers it took to get there. So the ping just abstracts all of these steps. And that's why I went through a little bit more detail. And then this diagram just pieces all of that together. Any questions on this?
I have another question.
Sure.
Is it more of a tool or a learning tool? Because I feel like you can only download it on your personal computer, but it's like a security thing. So
Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, using it as a tool for security, but not using your work computer, it sounds like they don't coincide, like for security reasons.
So not all corporate environments are going to have this, and it's just some corporate environments are going to have it just because they're really sticklers to this. But one second, I will answer that question, but unfortunately, until I get my new Zoom account, we're going to have to, this ends in 40 minutes after the start date. So we're going to have to stop the Zoom session and then just rejoin at the same link, because it's going to shut off in literally less than a minute. So I'm just going to end it right now to make it easier for everybody, and then we'll restart and then I'll answer your question, okay?
Okay, great.
All right.